Hi, y'all. Welcome to the panel. For those folks that are here, we're going to give people a few minutes to join, and we will plan to start at about 5 minutes past the hour. Thank you. Well, I'll just sit here awkwardly in silence while we wait for the 5 minutes pass. We're all used to this at this point in the Zoom life.
Well, this is awkward. Yeah.
Most fun part of letting everybody get into these panels. I was just sitting here thinking, I feel like I need some sort of like musical tee up or something to sort of get the vibes going.
Well, maybe we can start by telling everyone that I feel like I look bald, but I'm using the hearts background. So we're just gonna move forward with it.
I'm personally grappling with the fact that my receding hairline has opened up enough of my forehead that the camera is having trouble reading what's the wall behind me versus what's my forehead. But that's life as we approach middle age, I guess, for some of us. Try to lean in at the right distance so I don't look like an 80s music video the whole time.
I was going to say you didn't enjoy me furiously trying to update my background and download the image at the same time.
All right. We're getting a good mass of folks here. That's great. We'll get started here in just about 1 more minute.
I feel like I'm on Hollywood Squares a little bit.
It does.
I feel like we've all been contestants on Hollywood Squares for, I don't know, what is it, about 18, 20 months now. So we are at 5 past, so I think we can go ahead and get started. My name is Chase Money. I'm an agency partner with Meta, the artist formerly known as Facebook. Very excited to be joining my friends from Hearts and Science today for a conversation about the Great Resignation, the advertising industry. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes. We will do some quick introductions, and then we will go into a sort of a guided discussion for the panelists here for 30, 40 minutes or so. But throughout, please feel free to join in to the conversation in the chat, submit your questions either there or via the Q&A tool. And toward the end of our hour together, we will go to questions from the audience. And with that, I do want to introduce our panelists. So I will, just to facilitate ease on Zoom, I'll go ahead and call on folks. So why don't I start with Rachel?
Hi, Rachel Holmes, Executive Director, Client Business Lead, over a number of businesses. I won't bore you with the details there.
Great. Why don't I throw to Maria?
Hi, everyone. Maria DePamphilis. I'm an executive director at Hearts and Science for Marketing Sciences, supporting all things AT&T all the time.
And Chris.
Yeah, Chris Principe, Executive Director of Digital Activation at Hearts, and like Rachel, across a bunch of different clients that I will not bore you with.
Never boring, guys, never boring.
That's true.
And certainly last but not least, I'll throw it to Dana.
Awesome. Hey guys, I'm Dana Bastille, Chief of Staff here at Hearts and Science.
Awesome. Well, once again, let me just express it's a real pleasure for me to be able to join this group. As I mentioned, these are friends. I'm excited for this conversation because I do get the opportunity to work with these folks all the time. I actually work with Hearts and Science in my day job. So I will bring a little bit of that perspective into some of my questioning, as you'll see. But also really excited to start this conversation because I think, we hear a lot about the Great Resignation sort of in the ether right now, but I think for folks in our industry, I know some of the folks on the phone, like this is a lived reality and something that we're working through with our teams and really committed to finding a way to working through productively for businesses we serve, for the teams that we all lead and manage. So really hoping we can walk away with some great learnings today. So before we get into that, I did want to briefly sort of tee up the conversation of, what is the Great Resignation? Sort of why are we here? And I think at its most basic, right, we can all agree it's sort of a numbers game. We look at the fact that resignations across the economy are up. Most recent data for September showed 4.4 million Americans resigned from their job in September. It's 3% of the economy. It was a record-breaking month, breaking the record that was set in August when 4.3 million Americans resigned from their role. But so at its most basic, right, it's this idea of those folks that are actually doing the resigning. But as we look into the coverage of it, we also see that there's a lot of consideration about people thinking about making a move. Some recent data from Microsoft in a survey that they ran globally actually showed almost 41% of people were thinking about or considering making a move. And as you dig a little bit further into discussions of the why, it's actually really interesting to see that there's not really one great resignation going on so much as there are a myriad of factors that are all sort of conspiring at the same time to have an impact on the people in the workforce. For many people, the changes brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic have opened up new opportunities and new considerations, especially folks in sort of professional services industries, so obviously relevant here. But we also see that there are other things like inability to have access to childcare because the daycare is closed or the school is not open, which drives some of these decisions for folks. And I think it's also important that we consider the often disproportionate impact of some of those considerations as we look across the communities that we work with and across gender lines, across racial equity considerations. And so it's really not one thing that's happening. It's a whole host of things. And you could even just say that the economy is growing, there's increased demand, and so it's a worker's opportunity. So all of these things really conspire. And with that, what I really wanted to then bring into this conversation was use it to tee up. We're fortunate to be speaking with leaders within their own organization as well as partners with major clients across a number of industries. And I'd just love to get the perspective of folks here. What are you seeing? What are you hearing about the sort of the why behind the Great Resignation? I think that'd be really an interesting place to start. And maybe Rachel, I'll throw that to you first as our client business lead.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a couple of things from my perspective, and it's probably way more than what I have visibility into. But I think part of it is advertising. When you are in college and you're dreaming about what it's going to be like, it's going to be a little crazy, it's going to be hectic, and you're almost inspired to want to jump into the fray. But part of the benefit for more junior employees is They get access to things that they may not get access to. So even if your salaries aren't really high, you're getting wined and dined a little bit. You're having this creative culture where, you know, every agency seems to have a ping pong table or a foosball table or something that's a little less corporate, and you get to work with really fun, cool people doing things quickly. So then all of a sudden you're at home, you're by yourself, you have a lot of time to think. You're missing out on what were the key perks to the job. And now you've got all of this work, all of the grind, without some of the things that maybe have drew you into the first place. And what I've been hearing are people are making life decisions. Does this make me happy? Do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Could I or should I be doing something different? We've had people go into nursing. People have gone to teaching. They're going into completely different fields. So it's not necessarily that it's just, you know, agency hopping. They're really thinking about their lives, their quality of life, and what's going to bring them satisfaction. And they're looking at advertising the way that we have always worked and deeming it kind of the juice is not worth the squeeze. So I know that and we're going to talk about it more, we've been talking internally about how do we make the juice worth the squeeze that's happening.
The Hollywood squares of it all, as we were teasing up front, you know, living through Zoom. And then that we do see that as I was doing my research in preparation for that, we do see earlier career professionals, I think, are disproportionately part of this sort of great resignation. So I think that's interesting insight to see being borne out, right? And think about that at the stage of career. Maria, as somebody who I know also made a move during some of this time and has led teams in a number of organizations, I'd be interested to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with everything Rachel said. And also what I think has happened with the pandemic is that people have just started to reevaluate themselves and how they spend their time, you know, and I think at this point, most people, particularly younger generations, younger millennials and Gen Zs, aren't necessarily thinking about jobs as just, hey, it's a job, right? They're really thinking about it in terms of what is the value for my time? You know, am I learning something? Am I developing? Am I part of something? And I think what's happened in the industry in particular, you know, because we know it's a tough business, right? Long hours, you know, there's lots of things that happen. When you take away all of those elements that, you know, have historically made it worthwhile, such as the social aspects, the community, and so on, in a lot of cases, it kind of leaves people wondering, hey, is this really what I want to be doing with my time? Is it really bettering me? So in a way, you know, some of the moves that people are making, I think are so positive, people pursuing careers that really speak to their passions and so on. But absolutely, I feel there's still a place for advertising and agencies in general. And it's really about helping folks identify the value in it for them. You know, it used to be that when people would interview for different jobs, they would say, okay, you know, really trying very hard to get this job, trying to sell themselves. Now it's a little bit of both, because I think a lot of people are just evaluating, like, is this a great mutual value exchange? Am I going to grow and develop? Am I going to get what I need from this? And companies are doing the same thing. So I think that kind of speaks a little bit to a lot of the flip that we're hearing in terms of the power of the workplace now being in the hands of the workers. That's not entirely true, but I think it's much more balanced, and that balance was needed. So ultimately, I think it's leading to more positive discussions. But the days of someone just, you know, desperately looking for a job, just graduated college, they're over, really. People are being very decisive and wanting to make moves that are in alignment with what is important to them. Does it work for their lifestyle? Does it work for where they want to be in the next few years? And I'm really thinking that's leading to a lot of the shifts that we're seeing out there today.
I think if I could build on that for 1 second, Maria,
Sure.
you put it perfectly in a value exchange. It's no longer about, you know, here's a job description, here you come to your job. I feel like our world was so transactional for so long, and that does not build a culture, that does not build empathy, it doesn't build loyalty. And so a value exchange needs to go beyond, I do this role for this compensation, and feel that there is a mutual investment and alignment to values of, I agree with where this organization is going, I share their values, I come here and I feel that beyond my job, there's an opportunity for me to grow and develop, and that this organization cares and invests in me in a different capacity. So I just think that you hit a nail on the head when you said a value exchange, because the value exchange now goes well beyond a job for compensation, and it is a cultural exchange too, and a personal development exchange.
Yeah, I want to build a little bit on that, and I'm going to throw to Chris. One of my favorite targets as a partner. I work a lot with Chris, and but through that, I've gotten a chance to see that, you know, he's been, as have all of you for the record, but Chris and I've worked on this a lot together. You know, he's been leading teams through, I think, a host of challenges. The Great Resignation is sort of a backdrop to everything, but you know, in the advertising industry, right, we saw early in the pandemic, in a lot of cases, significant pullback from clients that we needed to sort of manage through that process, which is its own problem. And then as we saw sort of kernels of a reemergence and certainly economic growth, which has only accelerated, then clients are ready to reactivate. At the same time, Hearts has won some business. You've been, you know, bringing in folks to service that business, again, against the backdrop of not just the Great Resignation, but everything else that's happened the last year. It's been a pretty disruptive time. With some of that context we just covered, Chris, I'd love to just get your perspective on, you know, are there any surprising learnings or anything that you're taking away from the last year as a team leader and how you're showing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is just acknowledging that the pace of things has been pretty relentless for the last 20 months or so. And coupling that with the adjustment to working remotely, I think it's changed a lot of how we need to interact with our teams, and I think created the need to be a little bit more intentional on how we show up for people and how we check in with them. So, you know, I think the first thing is just recognizing the level of demand on people and how hard they're working. I'm very conscious of trying to make the team feel like I'm in it with them, and you know, show that I'm willing to roll my sleeves up and I'm working alongside them through problems and stuff like that, which I think goes a long way. You know, on the other hand, I think it requires a lot more touch points with people to check in on how they're doing. You know, when we're in an office environment, it's easy to see somebody who's chained to their desk all day. It's easy to see facial expressions, kind of how stressed people are and things like that. But you can't do that, right, when people are just emailing or chatting through Teams. So a lot of it is intentionally checking in with people, but creating an environment where people feel like they can be open and honest to speak up when they're feeling overwhelmed or need help or need a change or a different type of project and things like that. So those are a couple of things that I'm trying to do. And then, you know, on the more positive side, the rapid pace that we're moving at, new business, new initiatives with existing clients. I think the other thing that we've all recognized is it does create a lot of opportunity for people. And I think across the organization, we've been able to move a lot more quickly and aggressively to reward people who are willing to take advantage of that opportunity. So yes, a lot of workload and stuff like that, but I think on the other hand, it's created a lot of really cool opportunities for growth and learning across the business.
Yeah, excellent. I totally hear you on the context piece. I think the stories at this point I've told a couple times is, you know, so much of what you're used to in the office is knowing a little bit about what's going on with people, and the number of colleagues that I have had, you know, I find out maybe 1 or 2 weeks ahead of time that they're about to go on maternity or paternity leave. Because we don't have that context and it doesn't come through in Zoom. And that's, I mean, that's like the really obvious stuff. You know, there's just a whole host of other contexts we're missing. Dana, I'd love to bring you in as well on this as the chief of staff at Hearts. Are there any learnings kind of, you know, Chris talked a little bit about that you guys are trying to scale into how you're operating with both, you know, current staff as well as prospective recruits?
Yeah, I think Chris brought up a really good point is in this time, unprecedented time, we had to be so much more intentional and prescriptive about our communication and interactions with one another. Like you said, when you're in the office, it's so organic that you walk past someone, you start a dialogue, like, you know, if they're going out of the office, they're going on vacation, and you have this amazing, what we call earshot learning. And that was removed so quickly. Like, gone are the days where I remember, like, if I was presenting and I was sitting across from someone and I give them the eye contact of like, whoop, this was a question I wasn't prepared for, they can jump in. And that's really gone. And so our communication style has to be so much more prescriptive, intentional, and proactive to, one, make sure that we're prepped. And it's exhaustive, honestly, like prepped going into meetings, prepped in how we communicate with one another and talk to one another, and how we check in. I feel like we've gone into this really like transactional space of, you get on a call, you have an intention, you get to an output, and you've lost a lot of that community and culture and, quite frankly, empathy for one another at times. So that has to be built. That's something I personally wasn't prepared for, of like how naturally that comes in an office environment and talking one-on-one with one another, and how intentional it needs to be in Zoom or a digital environment. And learning and development. Like, no one was prepared to manage fully remote teams or fully remote clients on a dime. Some people have gone their entire careers, got up to the executive level and not managed a remote team. So learning and development is something that we have to, I think Ralph put it like this recently, is like, we have to break it and rebuild it. And I completely agree, because we are no longer going to be in the same space, both with where our clients are going, with where we're going, and we have to change the playbook for how people learn, and create more of that hybrid learning opportunities, so that people don't feel like they're stagnant in their personal development and their career development.
Mute. Sorry about that. I do want to take this in a, I know, right? Seriously. I do want to take this in a slightly different direction that I think pairs up well with this. And I think, to the point of your, sort of the experience piece is useful. And I don't want to address y'all not necessarily as leaders and managers as we have been, but actually just sort of speak to you as individual professionals. I think you're not only leading in this time, you're also operating in this time as folks in your own careers. And I've worked with you all long enough and in enough detail to know y'all are pretty good at your jobs, which is great. But it also means to me that, like, there's probably been not probably just one opportunity that's come across your desks in the last year and a half. But you're still here and you've still got your hearts and science, Zoom background. I'd love to know what keeps you at Hearts. And Rachel, maybe I'll come back to you as one of the folks who's been on email threads the longest since I've been working with the agency, as a long tenured leader.
Yeah. Well, I turned my LinkedIn notifications off because that got a little overwhelming, honestly, and I don't need one more email in my inbox. I know some fundamental truths. I know that all agencies are the same. Okay, at the end of the day, they're all the same. So it comes down to, do you like the clients that you're working on? Do you like the people that you're working with? And do you believe in the leadership of the organization that you're at? So I came to Hearts for a very specific reason. I was very clear on what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. Hearts has respected that to a really good degree. And one of my asks was, give me a client and then get out of my way. Let me do what I do. Don't breathe down my throat with, well, Omnicom requires this, or Hearts thinks that every client needs to do this. Like, let me do what's right for the clients. And by default, I will end up doing what's right for Hearts, within reason, of course. And Hearts they came through. Like, they have really allowed me to be me. How I am talking to you is exactly how I talk to everyone and how I talk to clients. And so I don't feel a need to change myself. And so that is something that you can't really buy. Like, it's been really special at Hearts. I have the most fantastic teams. I love, 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 love my teams. So that also is like an anchor of, like, every time I even would like cross my mind, I'm like, ugh, I got these people, you know what I mean, that I've been nurturing and loving on for the past 5 years. And so it makes it, when you have strong teams, when you have strong culture, and when the agency delivers on its promise, then you are more likely to stay.
Maria, I also want to get your perspective, especially as somebody who's newer to the agency. And, as we mentioned earlier, looking around, it's the newer hires maybe that have had a little bit more difficulty sometimes connecting into new cultures, making those connections. So, like, as a newer member of the team, how's it going? How are you feeling about it? And what's keeping you tied into to the Hearts life?
Yeah, no, it's been great. I mean, it was a weird experience, to be honest with you, at first, because I even interviewed remotely, right? So it took me 1 year to actually meet anybody in person. And I think being new, sure, there's some challenges, trying to get to know people over Zoom and that finite time limit and having a specific objective, kind of missing that earshot learning that Dana was talking about, right? But you know what? I think what really has kept me here and engaged, so it's not just about staying here, it's like staying engaged too, and really being into your job, is the people. I work with really good people. And what I mean by that is people who care about others, care about me, I care about them, they care about their jobs, and really want to do the right thing. And, I've been in this industry long enough to know that's not always the case. So I do think, the people really set it apart. The other big thing that's really important that Rachel touched upon is the freedom to be you or me, right? So diversity, equity, and inclusion, huge, huge, big deal for me. And I think Hearts, what I've noticed is they really stand for something. There's not just a program where they have to get evaluated or, get invited to client RFPs for that type of stuff. That's quite honestly why a lot of companies have DE&I programs. Hearts is always doing it from the heart, meaning like they're commissioning artists, they're working with local communities. It's real and it's so cool. And for me, that's really important, because if I'm going to, give a significant portion of my time in my life to a profession, again, I'm not doing this just for a paycheck. I want it to represent something beyond just, monetary exchange. I want my time and effort to represent commitment to something, not just to clients, but what to an organization stands for, because I do think more organizations need to stand for something. And the ones that don't are the ones that are really seeing a lot of churn at this point. So like nothing I've ever experienced before, taking a full year to meet my colleagues and then finally meeting them and be like, whoa, you're so tall, or, oh my God, I didn't know you look like that from a 3-dimensional standpoint, like kind of fun things like that. It's, I'm not going to say it's been easy, but I'm going to say it's been worth it. And I think for anybody who's starting remote or is kind of new to the whole kind of remote teams thing, it does get better. It just takes a little longer, I think, to get that level of familiarity and comfort with others that you would more easily get face to face. But if you're working with good people, which I believe I am, it does come. And when it does come, I'm not going to say it feels quite the same, but it feels very authentic. And I think once we get back to, some semblance of, hybrid work models and so on, and on a more consistent basis, it will feel even better. So yeah, I guess that's just kind of a long way of saying that it really boils down at this stage of my career in particular to the people and the agency's commitment to something. And in this case, D&I is a big part of that.
That's what's interesting, I think, about both of your responses, and is not a surprise, but I want to call it out specifically, is just sort of the mention, people, culture, commitment to values, the kind of things that are some maybe a little squishier. There's not like a number you can assign to this, but it really is. If we're going to put it all in one word, it's a culture that helps keep folks there. And so I'm going to divert slightly from some of our planned questioning and go a little bit further with that and tie it to this connection of sort of remote teams, like knowing that Hearts is very intentional about that, but knowing that Hearts is also scaled quickly at times. I think we think about the Hearts founding story from like 0 to 60 is an understatement, to where we are now and operating in a sort of remote world. Like what are the things that you're communicating to managers and to leaders within your organization, as well as sort of some of the practice you try to instill with your individual contributors around keeping that culture when we are in this, knowing there's some future state where we probably reach some sort of an equilibrium? What are some of the things that you guys have leaned on in the last year to bring Maria in and connect the folks who've been there a long time as well? I'm just curious to hear more about it. I've been lucky to be in a couple of sessions, but I think it would be interesting to hear more.
I would be happy to jump in on this one. Biggest piece of advice, and I think something that we've done and will continue to do, is listen to your teams. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of organizations are making when it comes to hybrid models or return to work, or really the employee experience at large, is too much top down. we all have a very different experience. My experience vastly differs from an entry level, someone joining 1 month in. It will differ from how Rachel is managing her team and how Maria and Chris are managing their teams. So the first and foremost is you have to listen and you have to make decisions that are a combination of top-down guidance so that it's clear, but bottoms up feedback so that it resonates. That's so, so, so important. And I cannot impress that enough in this environment and future environments to listen to people, because I think that's also been a driver of the Great Resignation, is moving down a path and making assumptions about an experience or what delivery looks like for clients and how that impacts your people without actually talking to your people. Really passionate about that, by the way, in case it doesn't come through, but listening and communicating clearly, I think, are absolutely imperative. It has been an underpinning and a learning, I think, throughout this experience and will continue to be.
I'll iterate off of that. So I think a nuance to that is paying attention to what people aren't saying just as much. So, you know, I basically want to see people. So I don't demand that everyone be on camera all of the time, but I do like to check in. And if you're not showing up, then it triggers for me, why not? What's going on with you? Let me ask some questions. And if you're not on my direct team, let me check in with your manager and see if you know. The other thing is, I think we have to work harder at celebrating. So celebrating the silly things, celebrating the big things, making sure that we're going out of our way to acknowledge the work that the teams are doing, but also what's happening in their personal lives becomes really, really important. We try and carve out time for what used to be water cooler conversations, right? But so make time to just socialize, because that is important. Making sure that you're making connections across teams and that you have some sort of culture. It's different than what it would be in office, but it's still, oh, I like working with these people and I want to show up every day because we're going to talk about what happened last night on Real Housewives, and we are going to discuss the dresses that were, you know, at the Met Gala, and we're going to do the same things that we used to do in a slightly different way. But we're still people first, right? And making sure that we're enjoying our days and that the teams are enjoying their days and when they're not. So when people start to get quiet on any given, something that they used to do, they stop doing, whatever it may be, those are flags. And so listening to those flags is imperative as well.
Yeah, I'd like to jump into, I think for me and my team, what works is just keeping it real. And what I mean by that is just being open and encouraging openness to have whatever conversation needs to be had. So for example, if I'm having a one-on-one with somebody and they're having a bad day, I encourage them to tell me because I want to know, because if I know, then maybe there's something I could do, or, you know, maybe it's an opportunity to, you know, demonstrate some empathy or compassion and vice versa. So, and that takes time, I think, to build that. And then I encourage them to do that with their teams as well, which they do. Because we're in this kind of weird reality where, you know, the lines between work and home get blurred all the time. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's more challenging. And I think what people care about and what I care about is, you know, knowing that I can have a real honest conversation with somebody and they're going to tell me how they really feel about something or what's really going on. And I in turn can do the same. And that just builds trust. That, you know, just think about it, a very finite amount of time to build that trust. It's not happening where you're seeing someone for 8 hours a day. Maybe you have a couple of hours, you know, a day in some cases, or maybe a week, you know, to build that. So just, you know, no sugarcoating, no trying to look good, just really let's keep it real, right? And really honest and help each other. And that's gone a long way, I feel.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the big parts of that too is just trying to keep conversation ongoing and continuous with people on the team. So, you know, I think early on in all this, we got stuck too much in every meeting has to be scheduled. We have prescribed, you know, check-ins for everything, and missed a lot of the more casual conversations in the office. So I think a lot of what we've had to try to do, or I've tried to do at least, is you know, maintain steady teams or Slack or whatever conversations with everybody throughout the day. Between one-on-ones, between meetings, and some of that can be light and silly, but keeping those lines of communication open and having them know that I'm there also, you know, to Dan and Rachel's point, I think promotes some of that real-time feedback and honesty.
Great. all of that is super interesting and helpful, and I think keeping it real certainly resonates with me. I think the point of we experience it with our colleagues, but also with our clients. Like, how do we build some of that that relationship? Oftentimes, we're working in the Great Resignation. There's probably been some shifts in terms of the folks that we might work with day to day, and so I wanted to flip that a little bit outward as well, and talk about the client component of all the work that we do. How have you found anything that's really worked well to build connections with folks? And I think in particular, new folks, right? Folks where we might not have that shared history of the before times, given how much mobility there is in the workforce right now. I'll throw that to Rachel as the client business lead. That feels like the layup.
Yeah, we actually onboarded the first client, I think, if I'm not incorrect, we onboarded a client in June of 2020, right? So all new team and then all new clients. And it was a lot, right? It really was. It was painful to not be able to meet in person and build those relationships and understand the nuances of what their body language and facial expressions meant, really. Yes, you're looking at someone on camera, but it's just not quite the same. So I think we over-indexed. We went out of our way to have a lot of meetings, and looking back on it now, what I can tell you is we didn't apply the same rigor around what I just talked about, which is socializing and spending enough time just getting to know each other. We spent a lot of time on the business. We spent a lot of time to make sure that we were doing things correctly. But we did not spend enough time just shooting the shit and making sure that they know that we're fun and that we want to have fun with them and that we are interested and engaged in what's happening in their life and that we care. We got there, but I think if we had done more of that in the very beginning, it would have just put us on a little bit of a better foot right out of the gate. So I would encourage that. So the clients that we had pre staying at home, we were, it happened fairly seamlessly, and we maintained, the texting and the calling, and we send gifts, and we had a relationship with them outside of just the work that was, I think, imperative to maintaining a healthy balance. And they respected our boundaries, and we made sure not to, email them at crazy hours, really, really trying to keep the lines in place of everybody's working at home. So let's do as much as we possibly can to end the day at the same time every day, whenever possible. But also re-engage with each other to just, again, talk about what's happening in the world, have personal relationships with clients where it makes sense, has gone and I think a lot of the things that we've done will translate when we go back to whatever hybrid working model we're going to have, because they also are having their own struggles and decisions about who's going back to the office when, for how much time. We used to sit in the office with some of our clients for days at a time, and they likely are not going to allow people to do that. So just fundamental shifts in our relationships have been interesting. I think we've rolled with the punches, and that we've learned a lot about, at the end of it, and I go back to it, at the end of the day, we're all people. And so making sure that we're taking the time to recognize that, and that we are not just your agency. It's not agency first, and you are not just our clients, but you have things going on that we should be aware of and have empathy for and give you grace for. And we ask the same on our side as well.
I want to just comment on this because Rachel will never give herself the amount of credit that she deserves, but that has been a game changer when it comes to managing clients, is making sure that as a business lead, you're representing also the best interests of the team and humanizing them in a very, very remote and digital environment, which I think has really helped people feel like in times when burnout is real and demand is high, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and that we are true partners and not executors to our clients. So I know Rachel will not give herself the credit of that, but I have to voice it over because I think that it's been truly a testament of leadership and also business management.
Yeah, that strikes me as important on two fronts, right? Certainly in a remote world where folks are dealing with a lot more. But I think in terms of that employee experience dimension, whether we're in an office, out of an office, we've all been in those relationships with clients that maybe are very demanding, rightfully so, but like there's ways to deliver that where folks can grow, get better, work in partnership, to use your word, to achieve really outsized gains for everyone. And there are versions of that relationship where it drives burnout, drives dissatisfaction. And I think, yeah, that's a perfect call out into sort of business management. So yeah, kudos to Rachel. And just in general, I think to the Hearts folks. I do, as we're kind of starting to wind down time towards where we might want to have move to some audience questions. I do want to call that out again. If you do have questions for the panel, please drop them in the chat or in the Q&A function. We'll try to get to those in the next several minutes here. But I did want to pivot to sort of a future forward look at this, knowing that we probably have different working and office models of some kind in our future. Exactly what that looks like might not get clear, and that's okay. Knowing that we are in this period of the Great Resignation, there's been some recalibration, maybe some renegotiation of that work-life relationship. What does that value exchange look like, to Maria's point? I'm curious some of the things that you're thinking about, maybe some things that have worked well that you're taking away that you're going to use to sort of evolve how Hearts operates as an agency for both retention and recruitment. I think it's essential on both fronts.
I can jump in on this, and I think this is both like a client and a people factor, is doubling down really on experience. Like we said, the same way that when you go in and you pitch a client, you're like, this is everything you're going to have. And then they come into the door and there's not as much emphasis on making sure that we deliver there. Same thing with our people. You go in and you say, this is a fantastic place to work, and you're going to have a voice and a seat at the table. We need to follow through on that. And we need to make sure that we have more mechanisms to do so, whether it's bringing emphasis to specific territories like DE&I and having a leader there now embedded within the organization, whether it's doubling down on something like learning and development, whether it's deploying more frequent glint surveys. It's that follow through to make sure that from that first touch point that you talk to someone and you really position this as an amazing place to work, that actually ends up being their experience, that their growth is clear, the investment in them is clear beyond compensation. I just really feel passionately that experience, we can't let that dwindle, and we need to have more of an emphasis and prioritization around that so that the commitment and the promise that we sell people on is real to them when they get here.
I'm curious how that applies, and I'm teeing this up a little bit based on some of our pre-conversation, so I might throw to Maria right out of the gate here. How does that apply from a career pathing perspective as you think about the evolution of how we all work together and sort of the position we're in? How have you guys approached that conversation with folks, knowing, we mentioned there's the 3% of the population that did quit, there's the 41% of people thinking about what their next move might be. How are you thinking about addressing that sort of mindset as you move forward?
Yeah, we've been talking about this one a lot. And what we're noticing is that it is the old model of waiting a year until someone's doing the next role for a year and then recognizing that and promoting them just no longer works. The market's moving too fast. People are moving too fast. So what we've been doing is having open communication with folks, beginning to understand, who is maybe ready for something more, who is going to be seeking something more, and who's already pretty much demonstrated some aptitude for the job. So not necessarily doing the job in advance of getting a promotion, but making really smart bets on committed folks and maybe promoting them a little bit early, right? It could be 3 months early, 6 months early in some cases. And that has worked really well for us because these are really highly talented people. They're committed to the organization. We have roles and responsibilities that align to what they want to do from a career perspective. And they really do appreciate the recognition. I mean, back in my day, you'd have to do whatever job you wanted for 2 years before you were recognized for doing that job. That was a long time ago. Thank God those days are over. But I think just being very proactive, right? Because the worst thing that could happen is someone comes to you and says, hey, I have another role. And you're thinking, oh, I could have done something about that. When you only have that 2 or 3 weeks to do something, the time is very limited. So if you can encourage those conversations early, before another job offer's in hand. Oftentimes, I would say most times actually, there's a lot that we can do for folks who want to stay and grow and develop in advance of having to go out there and get another job and so on, where you can actually create a path for them within the organization. So I think it's really about making some good bets. And I think people appreciate that. I mean, we all appreciate that. I mean, if you think about it, when you take on a new job, I mean, when Hearts hired me, they were making a bet. They didn't know me. So, you know, and it's really about being smart and decisive and taking, you know, a really good leap of faith to make those decisions. And I think folks really appreciate that.
That's great. So that is wonderful. Thank you. And certainly I think speaks to the retention piece. I wonder if there's anything on the recruitment side that you've observed. I know you know, I'm on the calls with y'all. Y'all are staffing teams up quickly. There's been some wins. Any learnings that you'd share from that side?
Yeah, I think what we fundamentally noticed is that I think this is the entire advertising community. We moved slowly. We very much were sitting in a position of power of like, we're gonna vet 5 people, 6 people, and then we'll make a decision. And we're gonna have you talk to 5 different people across teams. And we have had to move ourselves out of that behavior. People have lots of offers in front of them. Other people are moving faster than us. So I don't know how many times we went to make somebody an offer and they'd already accepted a position. So we've streamlined how we work internally. We make sure that we have the right people interviewing, that those are decision makers, right? So that they can move quickly. They are fully capable of speaking about the job itself, as well as the culture and the team, et cetera. And we've cut that down, I mean, very significantly, I would say by 2/3, and with our expectation. Sometimes you have very senior roles and we do need to make sure that they're fully vetted by cross teams. But when we're talking about more junior staffing, I think we've had to train people that we're not sitting around with, you know, 30 people knocking at our door the way it used to be just a couple of years ago because they just graduated college and they want to get in at a great agency. They have lots of opportunities. So on the flip side, how to sell ourselves better and make sure that we're having the right conversations during that interview process, that every touch point that a new employee or prospective employee has could sway them in some way. Right, and that goes to our recruiters as well. So are they being responsive, and are they timely in how they're communicating and what they're communicating and how thorough they're being? So it's a big shift, honestly, and we're having to break some habits and make sure that people feel prepared to move quick. You're going to have to move some meetings. You may have to miss X, Y, and Z to make sure that we can interview this person in the next 48 hours so that we can make an offer as quickly as we want to. And I think that's relatively new for us, but we've already seen some great progress just from making that change.
You also, Rachel and Maria touched on this, is like hiring for potential too. So looking at if somebody doesn't check every single box of what a job description traditionally is, well, what's our learning map for them? How do we get someone in and cross-train them? Maybe they started in search, but they're passionate about social, and the recognition that passion and desire to learn is 80% of it, and we should take them the 20%. So really redefining what the expectation of talent incoming is and how to hire more for potential versus just traditional expertise, I think is important.
Great. I want to reference, there was a comment posted in the Q&A, not so much a question as a comment, talking about sort of managing conversations with clients. I think Dana, maybe it was you who mentioned to, like, you know, give the high sign across the table.
I love that.
I think this is fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a great point.
Yeah. If any.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead and you go ahead and take it. No,
go ahead.
no, please go for it. Your comment.
Yeah, I love this. And I think everybody should be able to see it, but it's that, you know, in a remote environment, instead of someone having to jump in, someone can feed you the response. And I think, again, this is why dialogue is important, is everybody's experience in a remote environment is different. What I perceived and see sometimes as a negative has a positive. on the other side of it. It's made someone more comfortable. So I think I don't have a comment beyond that's fantastic. I think that it's good that we're looking at different alternative sides and that you have fallen into a groove with your team where it's like given the signal, feeding each other the answer. I also have seen the benefit of like having those side chats going on of like, okay, this person, you jump in on this is redirected to you, because having to do air traffic control on a meeting in a remote environment is a full-time job in and of itself. So I think that's just fantastic. And I think, again, like positives and negatives to every situation, and making the best of it is the best case scenario.
I think there's a, I saw that comment, I thought it was really interesting and I agree with it. But I think we learned very quickly the first couple of months of staying at home that not everybody's paying attention in every single meeting. And so sometimes you need someone to ping you the answer, and they may be, you know, sidebarring on something else or whatever it may be. So we've all learned how to readjust of like, oh, okay, on this particular topic, I definitely need to pay attention to make sure I can cover if need be. And again, it's stretching new new skills or learning new things along the way about how to help each other. And that we can't do things the way that we've always done them. But she's so right. I don't know how we do it all day long. It's like the client asks the question, I give them a blank stare, and then someone magically gives me the answer, and I love them for it.
It's much easier than being huddled in a conference room and having the phone be muted for 15 seconds while you all try to whisper to each other, though. The chat feature helps. I want to keep that going.
Interesting. I think to your point, Rachel, also speaks to that. You know, we have a new, I don't want to call it a tax, but a sort of new muscle that we have to exercise in terms of meeting prep, right? Like, you're, you know, understanding, hey, we're going to cover this, so I need this person teed up here, and listening so that when that question, I don't know what the question will be, but there will be a question. I probably won't know the answer. I'm going to need you to shoot me the response real quick. Of course, I've never been in that situation with anyone at Hearts ever, but I can extrapolate that could possibly happen. Knowing that we are winding down here, and I want to make sure and sort of give like a closing statement to everybody of just sort of like tips and tricks you'd take away. I will do one last call out for the chat and the Q&A if anybody in the audience has anything they want to get in front of the panelists. But with that, I do kind of want to do a round robin for folks and just say, you know, is there anything else, if you had to sort of sum up your experience of the last year and like your greatest hits of like this is what I am taking away from this time that I think is most important for not just dealing with the pandemic, but like I've learned this about managing a team and keeping folks engaged and like delivering the type of employee experience Dana was laying out when we, you know, go out and have these conversations with folks. I'd just love to hear what any of those key takeaways are for all four of you, because you lead different and diverse teams, and I think it's going to be enlightening. So thank you for indulging me personally as I ask that question. Maybe we'll start with Chris.
I think the biggest thing is I'm trying to figure out the right way to phrase this, but trying not to be surprised or convey surprise or stress about anything, right? Like something crazy is happening every single day, whether it's a personal issue on the team or a new client business project, right? Like I think we've all had to get a lot better at just rolling with the punches and adapting to change. And kind of leading by example that way, and having that kind of adaptive, resilient attitude trickle down to the teams, because they're looking to see how we're reacting, how we're dealing with the stress of change and extra work and all that stuff. So just kind of being more flexible and rolling with it, I think is the biggest change for me.
I'm
Is it fair to say?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say
Fine, go ahead, Maria.
That's such a good one, Chris. I'm going to piggyback off of that one and kind of revise my keep it real for a second. So keep it real, but keep it appropriate, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that open communication and dialogue is so important, but For example, if you're, working with a junior member on the team, that does not mean you are open about all the stresses and woes that you might be dealing with that day, but you have an open runway that they can share those things with you. And then as appropriate, you share, the relevant challenges and things with your team, kind of as needed. Because you're absolutely right. I've seen that too. Like, it's okay to let people know that maybe you're going through a challenging time. That keeps you human. But at the same time, as leaders, part of our job is to help pull people through, right, together and inspire. So, I think it's important to be mindful about what you're communicating to whom and making sure it's really appropriate for that type of conversation that needs to happen, whether it's internal or external for that matter.
Great. Dana, I see you coming off mute.
Yeah. Advice and learning, the work will always be there. You have to make time for yourself. You have to. I know it's impossible, but feeling, especially in this kind of environment where someone said it really well the other day, it's not working from home, it's sleeping at the office. I know that's impossible to do and seemingly impossible amid open roles and work that never feels like it ends, but you have to, because you will never contribute as much as you want to if you don't contribute to yourself and your cup is not full too. So making time for yourself and also being, from a leadership perspective, empathetic to when your team needs that time, when they need that moment, is critical.
Yep. I agree with all four of them. 100%. I think empathy is probably what I'm recommending, advising, right? So everybody's having some sort of personal situation, every single person that you're talking to, clients included. And if you join a conversation that's difficult, or if you notice that something's having a hard time, if you just approach it from, a place of concern and how can I help, or what's going on, the dividends of that are huge. And I think that there's a lot of people that are falling back to leaning too much into like process, or I need to push things through and I need to just get things done, and this is what needs to happen. And I would rather something take a little bit longer. People have the time to do it correctly when possible. We work in advertising, so things are insane. But really stopping and thinking to myself, hey, so-and-so has a 1-year-old and their life at home is crazy. This person has a sick parent. This one has a dog that shits all day, every day, and she's always running around trying to clean it up. Whatever it may be, like whatever's going on in their life is real and is a problem in their life. And I want to not just say or expect that from 9 to 5 every day, I expect to for you to be working. And if they're getting half their work done overnight, I don't care. And so I go back to what Chris said, which is flexibility. Like, as long as the work is getting done, as long as the teams are showing up the way that we need to for both our teams and clients, then I think we win. And so this is allowing us more flexibility, and we have to embrace it and really just sit back and say, wow, things didn't have to be the way we've always done them for the last 70 years in advertising. Like, this is flipping everything on its head, and that's okay. Change is okay. And we're going to come out of it more flexible, and I believe better in the end. But Chase, you're on mute.
Man, darn mute button. I will say, I know we're coming up at time, but if folks can give 30 seconds, I want to acknowledge one question that did come through while we were chatting there, which was, what would be the best way to kick off a conversation about an expanded role or raise if you do find yourself weighing opportunities? I think going to the sort of the point you were making earlier, Maria, would love anybody who wants to weigh in on that real quick before we let folks go.
Yeah, I think it's actually easy. You just go to your manager and say, hey, I'm ready for something more. I'm interested in doing X, whatever it is. And I think especially at this point, and especially at Hearts, your managers are ready and willing to have those conversations with you, right? And there could be other opportunities that you might even be aware of that exist within the organization. So have those conversations early, discuss what the possibilities are. Don't wait till you have a job in hand and say, hey, I'm thinking about leaving, because that doesn't give anybody a whole lot of time to think about what could be or what could work potentially differently. I can speak from my team. We've promoted at least 6, maybe 7 people this past year who raised their hand and said, hey, I want to do something more. And you know what, guess what? We had plenty of opportunity to do more. So don't hesitate. The sooner the better to have that conversation.
All right. Well, we are right at time, so I want to thank the panelists once again for this very interesting conversation. I hope folks found it on the line, found it as illuminating as I did. And with that, I think we will let everybody run off to what hopefully isn't quite a back-to-back meeting, but you know, if so, you're free to go. Thanks so much, y'all.
Thank you, Chase.
Bye.